This is Anarchast.
Hi everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I'm coming in from Acapulco, Mexico, and I have Victor Pross coming in from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada today. How are you, Victor?
Very good, Jeff. Thanks for speaking with me.
It's great to have you. And first question I ask everyone is, how did you become an anarchist?
Sure. Yeah, well, basically, I've been interested in philosophy my whole life, ever since I was a teenager, and I've never been happy to accept what I call hand-me-down beliefs, you know, just like whatever the culture at large has been stuffing into my ears all throughout my childhood, and some of it not sitting very well with me. So I have an intellectually active and curious mind, and so that is basically is the foundation of where I would come at this point in my life as to be describing myself as an anarchist, which is more or less a conclusion, and it's a conclusion from the starting point of ethics. So that's very important to understand, that it's an ethical route that took me to anarchism. And I became an anarchist, I guess I can probably say, you know, rather late in life, maybe like about 5-6 years ago. I was a small government advocate of the objectivist Ayn Rand sort, but I consider Rand to be a brilliant philosopher. But when it comes to politics, I think that her political conclusions, as an anarchist, as a small government constitutionalist philosopher that she was, I think that her political conclusions contradicts her ethical stance insofar as where she stands with the non-aggression principle. So it's something that I've always took for granted, that yes, we need a government, and I've always was of the mind that for those who spoke against it, whenever I ever had like any kind of swipe with anarchists, I just thought, my God, these people are just crackpots. Are they serious? So it really is funny to look at myself and reflect now on myself about at that time, and to realize, you know, that's the whole point of philosophy, is to ask these questions and not to take and to separate axiomatic concepts from those areas of which arguments can be made for. I don't know why. Here I am describing myself as being very intellectually activist. I'm an avid reader. I've been that for ever since I was a teenager, and here I am just considering the government, the state, as an axiomatic moral absolute, and those crackpot anarchists. And I thought, this really just finally, something just snapped and clicked, you know, after giving the philosophy a hearing, and to realize that it was a philosophy, not just adolescents' indulgences on caffeine and drugs. You know, finally, I just availed myself to the material, and I thought, like, man, I just got to follow where the logic and the evidence goes, and that's where basically how I arrived at where I am now.
That's fantastic. Yeah. I think the main difference between a minarchist and an anarchist is really just 6 months, depending on how hard they think about all their concepts. Yeah, I think it is the logical evolution of these thoughts is anarchism and non-aggression. And it's quite beautiful once you get there, isn't it? Because it is so simple. After years and years of thinking about these things and trying to figure out what's going on, to actually come to such a simple conclusion, I find is really a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Well, actually, you know what? It's funny that listening to you, and I've listened to a lot of your other guests, how they speak about, you know, that the non-aggression principle. Like, how is it that people can't get that? Like, this is not a large mental feat of abstraction to get such a simple conclusion. However, I would say that I would agree with that, because I've always considered myself to be one, as starting from the gate out in my inquiry in philosophy where ethics is concerned, is that non-aggression. Yes, I was always there, even during my minarchist small government days, but making the further identifications of tying that to concepts like you know, government or the state, which claims to be the protector of individual rights and the protector of property, but to make the connection that it's a ridiculous contradiction. That took a little bit more mental work, but the foundation, though, the non-aggression principle, it's very easy. It's very simple, and for those people who just have trouble getting it, they are deeply brainwashed, or they don't want to get it. So that's where I stand on that. That's for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is sort of a brainwashing, a sort of a mindset. I guess, you know, we go to 12 years of public indoctrination, and all the media on TV every night. It's all very pro-statist, and it's just amazing how such a simple thing, just non-initiation of force, can elude so many people, and they can't even see how the state actually does that. They actually see the state as being something good. They look at someone like Obama as being a good person, when in fact he's stealing from people and murdering people every day. It's just, it is quite wonderful when you do realize that, and you can get above that and see things for what they truly are. See the violence that is actually all around us in society. People say if we lived in an anarchist type of society, it'd be very violent and chaotic. But that's the exact opposite of what it would be. That's what the state is, but it's hidden in a way. It's one step removed from people, so they don't actually have to do the stealing or murdering themselves. And so for some reason, they can't see that that's what the state does.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, though, is just that a lot of people, I mean, there are those people who would excuse this type of thing away, you know, and say, well, he has to do that, it's for the greater good, blah, 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 blah. I mean, those people are truly lost. But there would be a lot of people, you know, like take small government guys like Christopher Green, you know, they're raising hell. They're raising almighty fury against this monstrous injustice and this beastly beast called Obama. He is an abomination, for God's sakes, and it's clear to him. But these type of minarchists would, you know, can shoot their darts at very appropriate subjects, but they're still, they still ascribe to the whole idea, you know, that we need a government. So that is still deeply rooted there, you know. And I would say that there's probably, to fight for those type of minds is probably a worthwhile endeavor. But the first type of person who just kind of blithely dismisses the non-aggression principle and justifies, you know, the state doing all these nefarious activities that Obama is doing, they are completely lost. Just write them off. You can't save everybody. Can't save everybody.
Yeah, maybe they'll get it one day. But yeah, I agree with you. I've sort of stopped trying too hard to convince people. If you know, they're either going to get it or they're not going to get it, and there's really no point in pushing them too far. Is that sort of the state you're at right now? And you're dealing with people in society who don't seem to get this? Do you just let it go, like you just said?
Yeah, well, yeah, not as a blanket rule, not with everybody. Like I say, for the longest time, that I accepted it as axiomatic that we need a government, but I was certainly not somebody who didn't finally let the scales from my eyes. So there are, like I say, I'm not so quick, like a knee-jerk reaction, to condemn people who don't immediately jump in line and agree with me. But after a certain point of presenting my views, which I consider to be unambiguous and very straightforward and clear, over a period of sustained time, and somebody who still hasn't even heard, who still argues against me and makes arguments against that which I have not presented or have not even absorbed anything that I say. It's one thing to disagree with me, but if you don't understand where I'm coming from, that's an entirely different thing. You're not agreeing or disagreeing. You know, you're not listening. You're not getting it. So those people are just a waste of time. But it is not. But we're not obligated to pontificate and to begin with. I mean, we only engage in conversations that interest us, and I will speak to people about politics and present my views and argue my case, but selectively. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. So was there any one thing that you'd say it was about 5 years ago you started to awaken to these concepts? Was there any particular book or anything you came across that really tipped you over? Yeah.
Well, I've always known of the works of Murray Rothbard and so forth, and just ever since with the internet world, I've jumping on since it came very vogue around '95, and when I got a computer a couple of years later, I just started browsing around and came across certain individuals, and one individual that I can tell you who came on the scene, of course, would be Stefan Molyneux. And originally, I had met Stefan way before his internet philosopher days, back in around like '95. We traveled in the same intellectual circles, and we attended some of the same lectures that took place in Toronto. And like Stefan, like myself, was a former objectivist, and it was a lot of the lectures that we attended were objectivists. And I met him through a mutual friend. On one of these lectures, we went to a donut store, had coffee, and talked philosophy into the wee hours of the night after a lecture. And and it's interesting that back around '95, how Stefan himself was very much still a developing, searching mind, and so we just kind of like traveled along the same path. And when I came across him, I thought, like, well, this is interesting. I'll have to listen to what he has to say about anarchism. And so that's pretty much where I got my scope.
Oh, that's very interesting. You knew Stefan before he was an internet celebrity.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I had the privilege of talking philosophy with him too. Like I had very vivid memories of that. And and I can tell you, as a contrast, there certainly has been leaps and bounds in intellectual maturity that he took.
Wow, that's interesting to hear. I didn't actually know he was an objectivist before either, so I'm learning a lot here.
Yeah, for sure.
So what would you say to someone who's sort of where you were 5 or 6 years ago, if you could, in a few minutes, what would you say to someone in that state of mind, and maybe even talk a little bit about how you would see anarchist world working, or how we could even get there? What are some of your thoughts on these things?
Yeah, well, in regards to getting there, like there's a very interesting thing in connection to that with Stefan, which is his views being very popular in that he regards it as a multi-generational thing. And I remember you talking to Michael Shanklin about this, and you feeling that with everything coming to a culmination with statism being very brazen at an unprecedented level, that people will go like, wow, like this is ridiculous, and maybe within 5 to 10 years after a post-apocalyptic economic collapse, people will finally snap in line and get it. And I'm really like, sorry, I don't want you to put that pistol to your head, as you said to Mike Shanklin, but I just don't see that. It simply is not that simple. People could be bombarded over the head, bloodied, and battered with all types of existential, empirical experiences of statism in action, and never make that connection that hey, this is bad. Maybe we should think of doing something else. You have to start it. It has to be a philosophical revolution, and this is also to speak against all the Ron Paul accolades. Not that it's a mute matter now. But for all those who think that who are going to achieve freedom via the machinery of the state, which is what the whole Ron Paul revolution was about, they are sorely deluded too. This is a multi-generational achievement or a process. And the reason why I say that is because it has always been so historically. Whenever there's been vast philosophical movements, it has been multi-generational. The Middle Ages did not end in a fortnight, or where that came over to be the Age of Enlightenment or the Renaissance, and then going to the rise of capitalism and the Industrial Revolution. This was multi-generationals apart. It wasn't like, okay, it's October 23, 9:30 in the morning. The Middle Ages has ended and the Renaissance has begun. So it is something that is deeply rooted in ethical philosophy. That is what it has to penetrate, not concrete experiences, the results, the culmination, the accumulative effect of statism. You have to go right to the roots of the matter, the philosophical roots, and that's why there must be an ethical case to be made for anarchism. And
can you make that case?
Yeah, well, sure. Like starting with the non-aggression principle, and it's funny that one thing that's very important, I think, is to snap people out of line of thinking that this is something that is doctrinaire, that it has a religious coding to it. Because I know that there's a lot of intellectual stumbling blocks that people have whenever they hear the case being made for anarchism. Like all of a sudden they think about like well, what about it's not compatible with human nature? It's show me in history where an anarchist society worked. You know, there's that pragmatic word again, worked. Show me that society where it works. How do you know that it would work? You know, and what about human nature? And what about this and that? And people who attach an ethical coding to the idea of a distributive wealth and things like this. It's an ethical battle that has to be made. And so you have a great deal of intellectual stumbling blocks to hurdle. That people can even begin to grasp these ideas. Now, one thing that, like I say, is not to take a religious approach to this, because if you approach it like, well, that's your belief system. I mean, you're looked at as some kind of like fringe Quaker. You have your little hippie flowers in the gun, kumbaya, hands across the water, beliefs there. You have to hit home that no, this is not like some kind of fringe belief creed or sect here. The non-aggression principle is something that's universal. It is something that is the bedrock, the foundation of any civilized society. And you can point out, as Stefan does, I think he has a very unique and a very effective approach of communicating these ideas, is simply by referring to people's personal lives. That they make all types of choices that are unencumbered, that are free. That they would be outraged if somebody trampled upon them, like selecting a mate, for example. Imagine institutionalized, forced, compulsory weddings of who you're to marry and how long you're to remain with them and whatnot. So that's just taking it to ethics and removing it from any kind of religious veneer. I think is very important as a starter.
Yeah, that's some great thoughts. You're an artist. You do caricatures. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. Some of them of a very sociological and political nature, and some of them just for entertainment consumption and taking little swipes and homages at pulp culture as such. And some of the caricatures that I have done is would be politicians like Obama and George Bush, and in those cases, if you look at those paintings side by side, they're similar in one way, is that they're dangling by puppet strings. So it's kind of like out with the old and in with the old kind of deal.
Yeah, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. And do you have a website where people can see your caricatures?
Yeah, sure. It's victorpross.com. And certainly those who would be interested in sending me a friend request on Facebook, where I post a great deal of my work there, and my own videos that I make on YouTube are welcome to do so. That'd be fine. I'd welcome anybody aboard and to discuss these issues if they have any questions.
Oh, so you have a YouTube channel?
Oh yeah. That's easy to find. If you just type in Victor Pross on YouTube, you'll come across dozens of my videos.
Oh, that's great. All right, well, that's all the time we have for today, so it's really nice to talk to you on Anarchast today. Thanks for joining us.
You bet. Take care. Hope to speak to you again.
Okay, thank you. And that's all for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.